I'm Mary Yule, and this is Energy Matters. I'm excited today to be joined by two guests, Senator Jay Kahn and just recently retired House Representative Marge Shepardson. Hi, I'm so happy to have both of you here today.
Hi.
Thanks, Mary, for the invitation.
Thanks for having us.
And I have been talking for the last several weeks so much about keeping track of bills that are at the that are going through the House and the Senate, and how to do that, and showing people links. And I was really hoping that you would go over some of the bills that you think are the most exciting as far as energy concerns. And
Sure.
and I've been really talking a lot about the New Hampshire Saves button-up that's coming up on March 26th, and that makes me think of the SB 122 bill, even though it's because of the extra money that would go into the RGGI. And I just hope that maybe you would have something to say about that bill and where it is, so people can keep track of it.
Thank you, Mary. So 122 has been in the Senate, and I believe Marge has tracked it through the House, and it has passed in the Senate. Now goes over to the House. The $14 million currently raised through RGGI, through a 4% tax, I believe. Only 1% of those.
$4 per ton.
$4 per ton. There we go. And so only $1 of that, and it's capped by legislation, is able to be applied towards energy efficiency projects. It really narrows the amount of money that we're spending, about $3 million a year, on energy efficiency out of the RGGI funds. We got to compare that to our neighboring states, which are taking the entirety of their RGGI funds and investing those into energy efficiency projects. This has been going on for years. Marge can track
Since
this.
2012.
Since 2012, okay, so years now.
Yes.
As that accumulates, you've got a shrinking electrical use in other states, and a constant, and in fact a little bit rising, electrical use in New Hampshire. And as you look at that over the entire ISO grid, which is the cost of the grid is proportioned by your use. If ours is continuing to rise at a slow rate, while other states are dropping because of their RGGI investments in greater efficiency projects and renewable fuels, you can see what's happening to the proportion of distribution and transmission costs that's being borne by the New Hampshire electrical ratepayer.
I could just add to that. As you're saying, the transmission costs are shared for all of New England and divided up by population and energy use. So as their portion decreases, who's left holding the bag? Our portion is going to go up, and that costs us a lot of money.
So by not investing more money to help people weatherize their homes in New England, it's not only, hurting those individuals because they're spending more dollars to heat their home that's really just going outside their home, but it's a kind of a double whammy then, because then we're paying higher transmission and distribution costs. So that's what's happening?
Yes.
That's correct.
Okay. I just wanted to make sure that I was getting that message correctly from
Yes.
you.
Right, and your viewers do too.
Yeah.
Because we often think that through acts of government that we are raising the overall cost, the electric customers. That is not what Senate Bill 122 ultimately will do. Because if we can cut and use efficiency as one of our energy pricing strategies, we can actually reduce consumption and reduce how much ratepayers are consuming and paying for utilities.
So even someone that has a really well buttoned up home could actually benefit from this, even if they don't use the Reggie funds, either by buttoning up their home or, if a lower income person then is able to use the Reggie funds to button up their homes. If that is done, then the people with already energy efficient homes would benefit as well, because the transmission and distribution prices would go down.
Just transmission.
Oh, just transmission.
Yeah.
The transmission would go down because the state overall would be using less energy.
Yes,
Yeah.
and part of the picture is if we can cut the peak usage, that's the most expensive electricity. When you need more and more electricity, you go to more and more expensive providers. So if you can cut off the top peak and not have to use that most expensive provider, that's going to help everybody keep their prices down.
So really just shaving off by doing energy efficiency could have a much larger impact than we might think.
Yes.
Because of that peak use.
And educating ratepayers about peak loads. I mean, even commercial customers are figuring out that if they do production in non-peak hours, they can shave a good amount out of their pricing.
I think that, and I know I'm jumping ship, but I had done some discussion in the very beginning of my show about some of that battery storage that Vermont has been doing to shave off peak load in the summer months. Mm-hmm. And so that shaving off peak load, other states around us again are doing that. And maybe we're suffering from other states being smarter about that peak load as well?
Could be. I mean, if you want to transition to a different bill, and we can cover that. This 167 bill, Senate Bill 167, which is going to develop a commission supervised by the Public Utilities Commission, but with external consultants that will study how do we use clean energy more effectively on our grid. How do we access those markets more assuredly for long-term contracts? And as we use cleaner energies and we can store it on site, that could be a benefit to multiple parties. I mean, that is part of what net metering is all about too, is helping grow the amount of energy that a user like Monadnock Paper Mill could be using its hydropower over the entire day, being able to fully net meter the amount of production that their hydroelectric generators are capable of producing. But right now they've got 3 hydro generators on site. They in total exceed 1 megawatt.
Which is currently the cap for getting net metered.
And they can't receive the benefit for running all 3 of those generators at the same time, which has over a 2 megawatt total production capability.
House Bill 365 would change that. It would change the cap from 1 megawatt up to 5 megawatts for large projects. Not just businesses, but municipalities too, which would help keep down taxes in the town. If they could do a large solar array or a small hydro project that's greater than 1 megawatt, they would benefit.
I was talking about that one a couple weeks ago on my show as a bill to watch because of that. I was talking mainly for municipalities because I'm usually on my show, I'm talking about residents and what you could do as individuals, but it's really interesting that it's also really affects businesses, that businesses cannot use all of their energy as well and be smart, and really that's their bottom line too, and that could be our bottom line as consumers, right? if we're buying their products.
Yeah.
I think because of that, businesses being interested as well as towns and individuals, that had bipartisan support, and it has passed the House by a vote of 254 to 98. So that's huge.
So that's going on to the Senate.
Yes.
It will, and the Senate was very strong on its net metering vote this last year. It
Yes.
failed in the House by 7 votes, as I recall, and the House composition is quite different this year. So I would bet that the governor will not veto this legislation this year. It wouldn't be good politics on his part.
Okay, so
But to get back to Senate Bill 122 for just a moment,
Oh, yeah,
before
sorry.
we leave it too quickly, that $14 million, so $3 million currently with the $1 cap of how much is going to energy efficiency. The other $3 of Reggie is being rebated back to customers.
And they
You
see
shared
less, they see less than $1 a month on their bill,
Yeah.
20 cents to 80 cents a month, depending on.
yeah,
Yeah.
which we may be actually paying more in transmission
Transmission, yeah.
costs than what we're being rebated.
Right, so to let Jay
Yeah.
continue.
Yeah.
Sorry.
So that other 9 million or 11 million.
Yeah.
So the 3 million currently would go to 5 million for schools and municipalities. So taxpayers would actually benefit a second way on this, because the amount of dollars that are out there right now for municipal and school projects is soaked up by a backlog of projects that are waiting in the queue for energy efficiency projects or solar projects in municipalities and renewable projects in municipalities. This would broaden it to allow schools to compete for these dollars. And when you think about the number of flat-roofed schools, it's enormous because they're covering huge spans, and the only way you cover huge spans is with flat
Yeah.
surfaces. And so that $5 million could be a real good investment to match schools and municipalities in their renewable fuel projects, again, cutting costs for taxpayers. The other $9 million then gets split in 3 different ways to for energy conservation projects among residential, commercial, and industrial classes of users. So there's a broad application of these dollars, and over time, this should have a very meaningful impact.
Some of the figures that I've seen this week, the low-income energy efficiency programs currently have access to $440,000 from Reggie. If this passed, they would have $4.8 million. And instead of doing a couple of hundred projects a year, we could do over 1,000 homes a year. So there's 10,000 people on the waiting list.
Yeah, so even if we did this, it's still going to take several years to just get all the backlog.
Yes.
Yeah.
True enough. And, I think we should give a bit of a shout out to Southwestern Community Services. If there are homes and low-income earners and families that want to modernize their own homes, there are weatherization projects that currently exist and funds through federal government to Southwest Community Services. So it's a small amount, and it won't match. It won't do the entire thing necessarily, but I would encourage, if there are low-income households that are concerned about their electricity bills and their heating bills, go over to Southwestern Community Services, because they've got consultants there who can advise them on weatherization strategies, costs, and rebate programs.
That's important, because even if you said the dollars are not huge, there are a lot of steps that can be taken that really get a good return.
Yes.
So to take that first step,
Okay.
go there,
Just-
do what you can.
Just changing your light bulbs, that's an old, I mean, everybody, we've been hearing this for a decade. And it takes a little money up front to buy, especially if you're switching to LEDs. But if the program can help you with that, then you're gonna be saving on your electric bill from the first day.
Yeah, yeah, so,
So we're getting in the legislative session, we're getting very close to this crossover date. This is what happens when every bill that was introduced in the Senate needs to clear the Senate to determine which bills continue on for consideration in the House. And likewise, bills in the House need to clear so that they can get their consideration in the second chamber in the Senate. Which means that there are some very important bills, and I think it's in the 70s, that will be coming before the Senate over 2 days this coming week on Wednesday and Thursday.
well, I'm not sure we can go over 70 bills, but maybe you can give us
No.
highlights.
No, how much, we don't have enough time to
Yeah, we
do
don't have
that.
enough time for all of them, but,
Well, there are some relative to the Energy and Environmental Affairs Committee of the Senate. There are two bills that in particular viewers might want to know about and offer input to legislators. Senate Bill 159, which would be me, but there are three other
Yeah.
senators in the Monadnock region serving, and as well as communicating with people outside of the region, because while this region I think gets it primarily on energy efficiency and alternative fuels, that those views may not be shared by our colleagues across the state. So one is Senate Bill 159, and that is the net metering bill.
Okay.
This is the bill which is very similar to the 446 bill that was in the last legislative session. So Senate Bill 159
Okay.
is the one that we'll take up this week relative to net metering and then send to the House. The second is on it's Senate Bill 124, dealing with our renewable portfolio standards. And that sets goals for trying to transition from our traditional fuels to renewable fuels by the year 2025. What Senate Bill 124 does is it extends that time frame out to 2040 and establishes new goals for the state to achieve along the way. And this is the kind of conversation that we've started to hear in municipalities to try to stretch out our view, our vision.
Yes, and Keene is very interested in that. They've got this group Ready for 100, meaning 100% renewables. And they've gotten the council to say that, yes, that's a goal of theirs. So this would help.
So that would, Senate Bill 124 would mimic that for 2040, would have the same, or?
It's going in the same direction. So
Okay.
yes, they're trying to get more renewables in this bill. And the council, if they're saying we want 100% renewable by 2050, I believe.
Yes, 2050.
Yes.
Yeah.
then they're both trying to do the same thing.
Oh, okay. Okay, so it's that same vision
Yes.
then going forward. Great. Then that sounds wonderful. Are there anything?
I could just add, 124, if we adopt it and are successful in meeting these goals, you would get to 60% renewable for the electricity sector by 2040.
Okay.
Right now, I believe we're growing from 15 to 25%.
Yes,
at
25 by
1% per year between 2015 and 2025. That's
think
the
that's
target
right.
in the current renewable portfolio standards.
Okay. Sounds good.
It does.
Yeah. We always want more.
That's right.
Yeah, but sometimes we have to be a little realistic, I guess.
Well, one of the pieces that might help us get there is the governor has agreed to look into offshore wind. There's a huge potential there, and the whole Gulf of Maine. And I'm excited that we are going to become part of that project.
Is there anything in the House or the Senate that's looking at that beyond his commission? Is there anything in the works to help facilitate that? Or are we?
There's a House bill, I don't know the details, that just says they want offshore wind.
Oh, okay.
It's more of a resolution, but I think if the governor's task force comes out with something that might do the same job.
Then we might see something in the future then.
Well, I think we might see something in the next legislative session.
Yeah.
So what we conclude this year then opens up the door to a next 2020 legislative session, and we'll go through another round of bill submission, and I expect that we'll see something about how the state might participate in offshore wind projects.
Okay, and then if people are listening today and they're thinking, wow, I really like some of these bills, I've talked about how to track them on different platforms, but what could they really be doing to get the word out, maybe to their friends or the legislature? What can they be doing to help back these bills that both of you really are so interested in and dedicated to seeing pass?
Yeah. I think invitations to legislators to come and view projects, understand the status of different projects and how they might be kick-started with public investment. This Senate Bill 167 on the long-term strategy as to how we get into longer-term contracts. It was disturbing to me when I was talking with somebody from a town in my district. They had a fairly significant potential project with a large solar array, and the reason that this investment was moving forward was because they had a commitment from Connecticut to purchase all the power. So once it gets up on the grid, who's sponsoring that power, paying the rate for that power, and because Connecticut offers a higher dollar per kilowatt generated with a renewable fuel, their standards, their portfolio, their investments are helping define a market from which they can enter into these long-term agreements. That's what an investor is looking for.
Yes.
Is a long-term agreement to pay over 20 years their investment in a renewable fuel supply. So I think I'm looking forward to that creative thought coming into the legislative process.
I think another thing people can do is to continue to write letters to their representatives and senators if they know of a particular bill, or even if they don't know the number, if they have an issue like net metering. I don't think that form letters are particularly effective. You might get 20 of the same thing within a week because a bill is coming up. But if you write an individual letter, particularly if you have a story to share, if your maple syrup industry is hurting because of something, or if you want to put up a larger solar array in your town and this cap is preventing you from doing that, then that can make a difference. It personalizes it, and it shows that there is support out there for what that bill would try to do.
Yeah, I mean, I've heard so much of that, and I know even when I click on something and it says that I can put it in my own words, I just erase that form letter and put it in my own words because I know how powerful it is not to see that
and
form letter.
Of course, you can, if you have the time, if you're able to go to Concord and testify in person on a hearing, that's always helpful.
Yeah, that is, and everyone knows that watches my show that I have definitely suggested that.
Good.
Go
It's
and
very,
participate.
That's very powerful.
Yes.
it helps us in multiple ways. I mean, as a county and a state, we've got 1,000 lakes. We've got 100 here in Cheshire County. We've got bodies of water to help support renewable fuels through hydro. Hearing a story like that Bob King can tell about his hydro generator in Marlboro.
On the mini wah-wah.
Yeah. That's telling a story about the region and then advocating for something on which he's passionate and is making a great contribution, turning it into a profitable business. And
Yes.
that's a story we need to
At
hear.
the same time, helping out the local towns by selling them his power, which is a little cheaper than Eversource's rate. So it's a
It's a win-win.
Win-win, yes.
Yeah, it's just a win for everybody. Yeah, so we're almost running out of time. We have time to maybe talk about one more bill or one more energy issue that you might have on your mind. Is there anything, now that I'm sitting with you two, that you have brewing that we haven't
Could I
talked
talk about carbon pricing?
Oh, please do.
Okay. There's something called carbon pricing that would put a price on pollution, essentially. It's similar to RGGI, that if you have a coal plant to produce electricity, it's putting pollution into the air, and both RGGI and a carbon price would say you have to pay something, you have to offset that with clean energy credits or pay a price, or people think of it as a tax, but the proposal I'm favoring is not a tax, actually. So there's been a lot of talk in the country, in many states and in Washington, D.C., about carbon fee and dividend. You would put a price on the oil or the gas or the coal that's coming out of the ground or being imported into the country. And we assume that the companies would then pass the price on by increasing the cost of gas or heating oil. But the money that's collected, instead of going to any government program, would be rebated to every individual on an equal basis. So they're getting back a check, a dividend, for $100 a year or $1,000 a year. It goes up and up. And that would be, for low and middle income people, it would be as much as, or even more than, the increases they're going to see at the fuel pump. So the low income is protected from rising prices by the dividend, and the whole reason to do this is that it brings down carbon emissions. People start to make different choices. They say, oh, maybe we don't want to build a new gas plant because it's going to have this fee added, which makes it more expensive. Maybe we should put our investment into offshore wind or large solar arrays or some clean energy that will not have that tax. And you get things on a more even playing field. It's an investment in better health. It's an investment in our economy. You grow green jobs. I just think it's a terrific idea. And we had a carbon pricing bill filed in the House. It had a hearing, and it's been retained in committee to be worked on for next year. And we have a carbon pricing study committee in the Senate that will come out of committee next week.
That sounds really exciting, and maybe we can talk a little bit more about it on a future show.
Sure.
Mary, if I could, in conclusion,
Yes.
where some of these ideas have been stalling out is at the governor's desk.
Yes.
So while the testimony and some letter writing to personalized stories is important, these stories need to reach the governor. And so when we talk about Senate Bill 159 on net metering, when we talk about Senate Bill 124 on renewable portfolio standards, or 167 on establishing this commission to study how we can acquire more renewable fuels with longer-term contracts in the future, the will of the people needs to reach the governor's office to try to move these pieces of legislation faster and be more competitive with our surrounding states.
Well, that is a great final message, and I really hope that everyone listens to Senator Kahn and lets Governor Sununu know what you think about those bills. And thank you so much for joining us today on Energy Matters.